Thank you so much. It's so good to
Thank
be
you.
here with you. It's like I said that I've been attending a couple of panels, but this one has like a special taste for me because City was a so important milestone in Pismo life. So thank you so much for coming all the way down from London to speak
No,
to me
you're
here.
most welcome, and I'm super excited to be here. And thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. So you have been working like you work already in India, Japan, Australia, in the UK, and you've been leading all this core banking transformation for Citi, which is kind of old institution in some ways. So tell us a little bit about how do you do like to cope with all the transformation, the innovation that is coming in a kind of the fast pace of innovation with an old institution like this.
Sure. So obviously, I mean, let me say I've lived in many different countries, not yet Brazil, so I guess that's on my list. It's great to be here. So let me talk a little bit about core banking and the idea behind the transformation that we're kicking off. I think one of the most important things in any transformation, not just core banking, is making sure that you put your clients at the heart of everything. So that's one thing we've focused on at Citi, which is making sure that it's client-led. So when you start from a client problem that you want to solve, I think it puts the organization in a mindset of solving something for the person who matters the most. And a lot of us have read about this empty chair concept that Jeff Bezos talks about, which is there should always be the customer at the table when you're talking about it. And that's what we've done. So we started from a place of we want to solve a real client problem. And core banking is something which is close at the heart of almost everything that happens in most big banks. So we led with the thought of client-centric innovation, which makes things very client-centric. I think the next thing is about thinking about modules, so a very modular approach to solving the problem and really looking at what are the modules inside the core banking platform that you want to simplify, which helped us think about the target state in a very functional way. I think the other thing also is when you're thinking about a global organization, we are present in, not only we are many years old, which means we have a very, very strong relationship across many of our clients, but we also have a presence in a lot of countries globally. And it's important that we stay true to our commitments, not just to our clients, but to our regulators across a very, very complex regulatory market. So driving innovation in the context of something which is so global, so complex, and so client-driven was really important. And yet, at the heart of this transformation was what we call like a culture change. Because I think being an engineer, I always feel like the technology part of it is almost like the easy part, like the fun part. I think the tough part is bringing the organization along on their journey. And a lot of the focus in the early days was on that, like driving the culture of change and really thinking about change in a different and innovative way. Thinking about saying, okay, we're going to look at core banking, but with an innovative mindset of saying we do want to go with a SaaS platform, right? That's a very forward way for a global and old bank, as you said, to think. But at the same time, we brought our legacy to the table with like a forward-looking mindset on, and that is what helped us kind of partner with Pismo and say, let's build a product for the future. So in a lot of ways, the way I think about it is the tenets of transformation are pretty standard. Like I don't think it's massively different for a lot of organizations, but I think what is unique is for each organization to understand their unique clients, like their unique footprint and their unique problems, and then apply the transformation in the context of that. And the heart of it is always the people, right? So investing in talent and then making sure that you have the right people both within the organization and in your partners is like a super important thing. So that's what drove us
Yeah,
towards the
for sure.
direction which we are going together now.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And when you think about like it's not easy. I always say that it's not easy. Just don't knock in a bank and say, hey, let me replace your core banking system because it's something that most of the cases they have been there for like decades, and it's not easy.
Absolutely.
So, what kind of architectural strategies did you adopt to make this transition like less painful?
So look, I think one of the most fundamental things is really defining your domain, right? So domain-driven design is at the heart of everything that we drove when we said, core banking means different things to different people. So for us, defining a domain-driven design was at the heart of starting out as we mean to go on, and that helped us build everything within the business boundaries that we had clearly defined. Following from that is like a very, very clear product ownership and accountability and really empowering the product to drive it in a way that makes sense in the context of the domain that has already been defined, which also means you're automatically thinking about things like compliance and thinking about things like controls. So controls by design, security by design, all of these principles come in the picture when you define the domain really correctly, right? Infrastructure as a service. Like I think that was one of the most critical components to make sure that you have a really good pipeline, because building things out in a way that are consistent, repeatable, there's a very clear rollback strategy. I think these things make change manageable because it's really important to drive transformations with resilience in mind. And if it's not built with that as a first principle, it becomes very hard to then sustain it later. Like the way I always think about it is going live with a project is almost like the first step, like having a baby. Like, yes, that's great, but then now it's here, now you have to make sure you nurture it, you educate it, and then it has to grow up. And then, if you're an Indian parent, you're like always parenting, right? So for me, it's a little bit like that, right? So you're always kind of invested in your product and your platform. And that has been at the heart of the architecture, which is build as you mean to go on. Always have exit ramps. Think of security. Shift left a lot of the things around secrets management, right? Policy management, codification of controls. So these have been at the heart of the transformation as we designed it. Having a SaaS platform also means that you're now changing the way the ownership works. So you're not thinking about ownership of infrastructure, you're thinking about ownership of service, which is a very different way of thinking. And which brings me back to the point of like changing the way people think is almost the tough part. And it's an ongoing thing. You have to constantly bring the organization along on the journey. But having a cross-product and a cross-domain team has made things possible. So we've worked together across product, technology, legal, compliance, risk and controls, and everybody right from the start. So everyone feels like it's their program. I think that is really, really important for any transformation to happen, more so with core banking because it touches so many areas. And I think that is at the heart of driving success on a long-term basis, not just on the first go round.
And it changes a lot, like when you think about ways of working and how teams should be working together to accomplish this kind of like milestone. It's something that it's being pivotal to make sure so that those transformations are successful.
Absolutely. And I mean, even if you talk about things like agile, right? Like everybody talks about agile. And agile is a way of thinking. It's not just a way of working. It's how you organize yourself as a team, how you feel a sense of ownership as a team, what you define clearly as a scope and domain. Ownership doesn't mean taking ownership of everything that's out there. It's also being very clear of what you don't own, because then you can put it in the right spot. And I think we've been driving those principles of shifting left the controls and ownership and the security and working in the context of domain, which has helped us drive the product in a very, very tight way.
And when you think about, like, we are talking about domains and modules and how we, like, what are the best strategies that we have for the transformation, but let's talk a little bit about cloud computing, because actually it's not only about the services and the domains that we are migrating. There's a change in the mindset from migrating like a legacy on-prem system, where like usually banks have that concept, or at least the sense that, oh, this is mine, it's in my backyard, I'm taking care of it, and then suddenly I'm shifting for some public cloud native solution. And usually it doesn't work like by itself. So there's a couple of things and a couple of applications that the issuers and the banks need to develop on their side. How was that for you?
Look, I think that's a really good question, right? In a lot of ways, bringing the awareness of what cloud platform actually means for an organization is really important, because for us, it was also being very, very aware of making sure that there is no anxiety around the fact that, oh my God, like what are we putting on cloud? So we were very, very clear about making sure that there's very, very good control on the data that goes on cloud. I think second thing is around making sure that we are actually solving, back to the problem of client-centric innovation, which is one of the biggest challenges that we were trying to solve was around the non-functional aspects of things. And this is particularly where, cloud brings a lot of power, right? You're talking about things like resilience. You're talking about things like being able to scale. You're talking about things like inherent security that cloud brings to the table. It's like things around TPS and things around latency, which were the challenges that we were facing. The issues were not so much functional. They were a lot more non-functional. And solving with cloud helped us solve the problem which we were addressing originally, which is how do we give a really, really high functioning, a 24/7, truly resilient product to our clients without forfeiting any of the security. And we went very, consciously about striking that balance. And this is why we picked a SaaS partner, in Pismo, where we get the right answer for the non-functional aspects and the value add that cloud brings without forfeiting any of the data security that, as a bank, we value very much in the privacy of our customers. So that has been a journey. And I think the other thing also, back to the point that I was making earlier about like cross-functional teams, I think bringing the organization and the controls into the conversation very early in the design stages helped us get ahead of this challenge quite early, because trying to explain something after it's already been built or after it's already been ready for testing, it feels too late, right? Like people need to have a say in the design, and I think that helped us feel like this was a project that the bank was driving, not something that was like tech driven. I think that's been a driver for us.
Yeah, and changed a lot. Like one of the conversations that we had like many times was around change management and progressive delivery of the things, because in cloud we are not only talking about like a change in infrastructure, how things are hosted, or even the shared responsibility model. We are shifting from something that you could think about 2 or 3 releases a year for, like we're doing now, like 500, 700 a month. So it takes a lot of the different mindset on how developers are building things, like small releases, testing, and make sure that things will be ready by the time we need it. So how do you think like this is for the ones who are used to the old systems?
I think it's back to the client experience that we talked about, right? A lot of our challenges are often faced because there's not enough understanding of the change that is going in. Now we're talking about an environment where the change is led by the customer in a lot of ways. And one of the most important aspects of making changes that are transparent is the point that you're trying to make in a lot of ways to the customer, while they're continuously improving their experience, is what we want to bring to the table. So that's what a SaaS platform allows us to do, because the rate of change is very, very high, but any negative impact to the customer experience is negligible or none. And I think that is the focus that we want to have. Like as we build out the platform, we want to focus on all the positives in terms of client experience and not have them held back by on-prem infrastructure or the large release cycles or being stuck in the time that it takes for rollback or the amount of time it takes to bounce back from, say, an outage, etc. So I'm very excited about the possibilities.
Yeah, I'm sure. So we thought about the shift from legacy to a SaaS platform, thinking about like shared responsibility model and how we'll bring some specialists to the table to make sure you have the most resilient and most complete solution. But tell us a little bit about the mindset shift that it takes to, usually when you have internal systems, they are highly customized, let's say, so you have usually not a common version, and when you go to something that it's a SaaS provider is offering for many different clients, usually you have like a scope of like, when we thought about like building Pismo, one of the things that we were trying to do is like how we can create like an alternative path between build versus buy conversation. How we provide the clients with the toolkit where they can, using the very same source code, build things on their side. So tell us a little bit about how is that?
Look, I think that the fundamentals of our solution have always laid in making sure that there's a very, very tight scope back to the domain conversation that we had. So what does the client want? What is the domain that we are solving for? And then almost like embracing the inherent resistance that a SaaS product will have towards over customizing it, right? And we had these conversations very early on with you guys when we were building out the product, which is like, almost push back on anything that doesn't make sense and is not true to the domain, because that will help us like build a better client experience for our client and be globally consistent. It also gives us as a bank, like for a global bank in so many countries, which has a lot of very country specific needs, a lot more control on our side. So we invested on the integration side by making it so that the product remains sacrosanct, but we have integration patterns that allow us to integrate into our ecosystem in a way that gives us that required customization as needed without forfeiting the integrity of Pismo as a product. and then at the same time adding into Pismo as a product where it makes sense for it to be a globally available feature or a product and I think that is going to be an ongoing journey, which is back to my point about like it's not the first go live. It is about making sure that we remain true to those tenets. One of the challenges that I think we thought in the early days we would face is how do we solve for every single use case in every single country as we go live. But I think we've come to a good kind of midway solution, which is almost like a two-tier architecture, right? Where we say there is a SaaS product that provides for the core domain and solves for the non-functional challenges that we have today. But then we still have an integration layer built by our engineering team that does the hooks into the local ecosystem. Because remember, not everything changes at the same time, right? Core banking is a central beating heart for the overall ecosystem. And there might be still last miles that are not fully migrated to a target state or not fully modern. But we are actually still able to integrate into that without forfeiting the value that we get from a SaaS product. And that two-tier mindset has really helped. But it was a journey to get people to start thinking about, oh, it's a headless core. Like, what does that actually mean? There is no UI. You're not going to go and start like pressing buttons. It's an API. Like your user is a developer. It's a very, very different way of thinking. But I think getting people excited about that idea was like half the journey. It was a really positive journey on our side too, because it attracted the right talent. It was an opportunity to upskill people. Everybody started to think about content in a way that is like much more domain driven, much more modular, much more integral to its purpose. Every service had a purpose, and they knew exactly what it was supposed to do and what it was not supposed to do. So very different way of thinking, but I think it lays the right foundation for the future.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. It's exciting. It's another. It takes a lot of time to kind of explain and improve the value of that. But once like the banks understand, I think it's extremely powerful, and we've been having successful in many of the cases that we are building. And while you were speaking, I was thinking that one of the challenges that we see usually is that sometimes when you people think about migrating systems or just let's shut down legacy system and then migrate to the cloud, or let's uh, it's companies can easily go into the kind of lift and shift thing. So most of the things that if you think that most of the systems that are running were built in a moment in time where we had like limited bandwidth, like the devices and the users were totally different. People were looking for different things. So usually one of the things that we believe at Pismo that it helps is kind of looking at the things and thinking, questioning, like, why is this here? Is this something that should be there? It's not only about migrating, and it's also about reimagining sometimes. Like, how do you see that?
Absolutely. Look, I think it's a lost opportunity if you take something that is old, and one of the reasons often why you're changing it is because you want to make it better, which means currently the way it is probably not great. Why would you take it and if you say take something bad and make it fast, right? Like that's not a solution at all. So we've absolutely looked at this as an opportunity to redefine, and I keep coming back to the domain, like redefine the domain and think about it as an identity almost. What is it supposed to do? First, define that. Is it doing what it's supposed to do, and is it doing in the best possible way? And everything else kind of falls apart. So I think migration of data and patterns from the legacy systems into the new systems, to think of them in the context of the current state problems and where we want to go in the future with our clients, I think it's a lost opportunity if you don't take that while you're doing transformations, right? So it's an opportunity to say, let's redefine the architecture and the domain, but also really redefine how we think about our business. So in many ways, it's an opportunity for like tech migration, but it's also an opportunity for like people migration. And what I mean by that is you're using this as a way of upskilling. You're using this as a way of redefining roles and responsibilities, right? You switch from being, say, a waterfall run team to like a completely agile team. You're training who used to be program managers into being scrum masters. So people also take on different roles. They start seeing different careers. They start seeing opportunities to learn and grow. And I feel like almost investing in the people and the organizational construct and the sense of accountability aspect of it automatically solves like the tech side of the problem. And that has been, to me like one of the most exciting journeys through this transformation. Just like building out the past. They do these like before and after. Like I'd love to do that picture which says this is how it used to be before, but not just systemically, but how we used to operate and how it feels now.
And it feels like with the technology changing so fast like, as it is now, like one of the things that I tell to my team or even to people when I'm interviewing them is like the only thing that I can tell you for sure is that the way we are organizing and what we are doing now is definitely changing in a couple of times because there's no target states for things, so we should be like always evolving.
Absolutely.
So yeah, all that said, like what there are still like many organizations going and or thinking about starting this transformation. What kind of advice would you give to your peers embarking on a similar transition?
Look, I think one of the few things, right? So one of the advice that I would give is like be very clear on your purpose. Why are you driving this transformation? There's no right or wrong answer on that, right? But you should be very, very clear what is the driver. Is it cost? Is it risk? Is it simplification? Is it all of the above? So being very clear on like the purpose of the transformation makes it very clear to align the organization in a certain direction. I think that's point number one. I think second thing is, and I feel like it's one of the most important things is value early delivery, right? Like don't forfeit the value of delivery for like architecture purity because early wins will gather momentum like nothing else will. Show something and people will follow, right? I think it's really important to balance that quite early on and driving your organization and the teams around something which is real as soon as it's in production, as soon as it's live, like, everybody gets excited about it. So drive that culture. I think the third thing also is to think about what makes sense for the ecosystem. It's not just the transformation that you're driving. Remember that there are other pieces that are also changing. Your clients are changing, right? The regulatory landscape is changing. So having the ability to have exit ramps and have like, course correction paths as you move on is like super important because what happens is a transformation cannot really be successful by itself. It's not a standalone thing. You're working in the ecosystem within your organization. You're also working in the ecosystem of a market. So having that constant awareness and evolving the transformation in that context is really important. The other thing is, I said before, right, like invest in people. It's never a system transformation or a process transformation. It's always people. So investing in people is probably the biggest investment that you will make because best talent in across all the products and technology and operations and legal, like cross-functional teams will bring the right outcome for the transformation you're driving. And I mean, it's probably cliche, but seriously, like have some fun, right? Like I think that is super important because nothing, if you ask me like the single biggest and most critical element for a successful program is like people who wake up in the morning and say, oh, wow, like I want to go and do this, right? Is it going to be easy? Definitely not, right? But like you wouldn't be doing it if it was easy, right? You want to do something that's like complex and fun and helps you learn something along the way. So make sure that you create the sense of like enjoyment and fun, and even when it's a pain, like there will be that element that brings you together and goes, oh my God, that was crazy. But like, you come out of it having fun. So make sure you keep that element going because that is the one, if you take one thing away from this, like make sure you have fun. So.
Agree 100%. Like sometimes it's tough, but I think that fostering that culture of continuous learning and kind of enjoying the journey, it's one of the best things to do. It's not easy, as you said, but it's worth like waiting for results. So thank you so much for coming all the way
Thank
here.
you. Thank you for having me.
Talking to you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, Dani. Thank you, everyone.